Hello, high scores and carnivores. My name is Joseph Moore and you are watching The Jalden Show. So if you came to this video expecting me to hurt, humiliate, or otherwise defame myself, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you. Because for my punishment, I've decided to go the week without meat. I've chosen this punishment in particular because I really like meat, and also because meat is probably just about the worst thing for the environment that exists. Disregarding animal rights and ethical reasons for whatever PETA says you shouldn't eat meat, it's still an extremely evil product. Odds are, if you're an American, you like to eat meat and you eat a lot of it. The current rate is hovering around 125 kilograms of meat per year, which is roughly, for you imperial people, 275 pounds of meat every year, which is second in the world only to Luxembourg, who eats about 300 pounds a year, or 135 kilograms. Multiply that rate by the population, that means the US consumes on average 38.9 billion with a B pounds of meat per year, which is also about 17 billion kilograms. Now that we have an appropriate scale of how big the meat industry is in America, let's take a look at a couple numbers on how it affects the environment. Now, according to the FAO of the United Nations, cattle produce roughly 9% of the CO2 emissions every year, and that's also taking into account the grain that is absorbing the CO2 that goes to feeding them. Cattle also contribute to 37% of methane emissions and 65% of NO2 emissions. And the transportation of meat and the grain that it takes to feed the animals that make the meat also takes its toll on the environment. Now, the jury is still out on whether or not humans are contributing to global warming or climate change in any way, but given the recent weather we've been having, I know this is a very narrow scope, but given the recent weather we've been having, we've had an incredibly mild winter, to put it lightly, and it's been a very warm summer. So I'm inclined to believe that there has been an increase in world temperature, and I'm not the only one saying this. There has been a documented increase in average world temperature over the past so many decades. Let's look at some of the resources that go into the meat that you and I love so much. I'm going to apologize in advance for using imperial measurements. I'll put the metric over to the side right here, just so you people in Europe or anywhere that's not the United States know what I'm talking about. In the United States, more than half of the grain produced goes to feeding cattle and pigs and other livestock. For cattle, the conversion rate, the energy exchange rate, I guess you could call it, is pretty abysmal. For every pound of beef, you need 20 pounds of grain to go into the animal. Chickens are quite a bit more efficient. Their conversion rate is about 3 to 1 pounds, but it's still a pretty significant difference. The land that we use now to grow the grain that goes to animals could instead be used to grow grain for people in the third world, and we could feed them. Or if the transportation costs are too high, we could just let that land be fallow for a while, and that would seriously decrease the rate of soil erosion that's going on in the country. Water conservation is also a pretty big deal involving meat. Now, I know the water cycles around the environment. It doesn't stay inside the meat, but still, for every quarter pound of beef, it takes about 50 gallons of water, and that's including the stuff that goes into grain and also quenching the animal's own thirst. The problem with this is, as more nations like China, India, nations in Africa develop, they begin to eat more and more meat. And with the more meat they eat, the more strain it takes on the environment, the more land that needs to be devoted to growing cattle, and the more land that needs to be devoted to growing the food that feeds the cattle. It's a exponentially larger, more area than you need, the more people who eat meat. Okay, so I'm ending soon, but I encourage all of you to take a look at your own meat intake. I'm not asking you to stop eating meat altogether, that would be cruel. Just try to eat less red meat. Instead of a roast beef sandwich, go for a turkey sandwich, for instance. Birds, poultry, always have a better energy conversion rate than beef and cattle. Beef are the same as cattle. It's beef and pigs, I meant to say. Okay, one more thing I'm just going to add. I'm going to increase the time limit on the videos to 5 minutes 10 seconds. The 10 seconds there are for the end. I want to put up a splash screen for you to click on some various links to my other channel. Go check them out if you haven't already. Bye.